It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The big news this week, at least in my state of Pennsylvania, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a deadlocked 4-4 decision, denied the Pennsylvania GOP's application to stay the state Supreme Court's decision to allow Pennsylvania to, wait for it, actually count the votes. I mean, and it's big news. The fact that the U.S. Supreme Court decided that we should actually count the votes. Now, understand, the decision is any postmarked ballot. If it's postmarked on November 3rd, it can be counted 3 days after. So November 6th, everything has to be in. So remember, don't wait until the 3rd to get your ballot in. Get it in as soon as possible. Please, if you're going to mail it in soon, or better yet, go and drop it off. The ruling also states that ballots that don't have a postmark on the envelope have until November 6th to be counted. Now, they say unless there's I forgot how they put it, a preponderance of evidence that demonstrates that it was mailed after election day, or was gotten somehow after election day. Now, the reason that they did this, and look, the Republicans in Pennsylvania are losing their minds. That how dare John Roberts, a good Republican conservative, stab us in the back like that. The reason is there could be transport. There could be something that went on with the drop locations. There are 67 counties in Pennsylvania. Each has a different election office. And getting them to a centralized location is time. I'm okay with that. As long as the names are there, as long as everything's square, we're good. And this is one of these moments where you go, remember who's screaming today. Remember the people who are complaining right now. They're going to be the people who cheerlead Amy Coney Barrett once the Republicans ram her onto the Supreme Court when she denies the right to count votes. Because, look, Republicans wanted to stop the count, pure and simple. They wanted to stop people from being able to vote. They want to throw ballots out. All of the things that Trump is claiming to do, they're thrilled. They want to do. Because they realize the more of us that come out to the polls, the worse it is for them. Which is why you're going to see the Republicans work through the next weekend to get Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. They've got to ram her through the whole process, got to get her onto that court, especially before Election Day, because they're going to need her. If this is a close election, as some are saying, there are some who are saying it's going to be a blowout. I'm not in the blowout category yet. I think some states like Pennsylvania is going to be close. You get Barrett on the court. I do believe she sides with Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito and the other the other pair, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. I see that happening, and then the balloting, just like in Florida, we stop counting the votes. So they got to get Barrett onto the court if they're going to be able to pull off a successful heist. Now, like I said, they're working through the weekend. They're going to rush this through. What's amazing to me is I haven't heard much coming out of the Senate about helping people who are struggling. I haven't seen a stimulus bill. I haven't seen any real talk from the Senate, even though their candidates really need it. And interestingly enough, I think they're going to wait till the last minute to try and go, see, look what we got, and steal it from the Democrats, even though the Democrats have been going since May. Here, take as much as you need to keep the economy from blowing up. Help people. And it's not about helping people, not even a little bit. And that's a serious problem. Now, understand, the Republicans have a 53-47 majority in the U.S. House, or in the U.S. Senate. Two of those votes have already said they're not confirming her. So you got a 51-49, which I got to tell you, I don't know that we should be putting someone on the court with that a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court with that kind of a vote. But here we are. We're in this moment. So going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out and what kind of games come of it. It's just going to be. Now, personally, I came in today with this mind that was just about to explode. Because I spent the day, making phone calls, talking to union voters about what their thoughts are, which way they're planning on possibly voting, what issues are important to them, and amazingly, I got to tell you, the right wing does a masterful job of brainwashing people, because I got the lesson today in, if you vote for Joe Biden, this is bad stuff is going to happen. And there was a long laundry list of stuff. Joe Biden gets elected, cities are going to burn. You do realize cities are burning now? There are a couple. And it's not all of them, because I've been to a couple of them. They're not burning. If you vote for Joe Biden, Antifa is going to run the world. If you vote for Joe Biden, MS-13 going to be around every corner, and those other people, they're going to move in right next to you in your suburbs. They're coming for you. Joe Biden's going to defund the police because he hates the police. He's going to destroy the police. So I got a bunch of these. If you vote for Joe Biden, he'll give the illegals health care that you can't get. Huh? If you vote for Joe Biden, he's going to let those people rewrite history and make it all black. If you vote for Joe Biden, he's going to bankrupt the nation, which I got to tell you is one of my favorites. Going to bankrupt the nation. And if you vote for Joe Biden, you're voting for socialism, which I find the most ironic of all of them, coming from people who are card-carrying union members, which, in its in its basic premise, the idea of collective bargaining, collective action, is kind of a socialist tenet, but that they're devoid of any of that kind of self-realization. But, it got me thinking, and, it's just this kind of scary world that we live in where, the bankruptcy part, again, it's another one of these moments where Joe Biden's going to bankrupt us because he wants to make sure that the environment's okay, that we have infrastructure, that kids don't go hungry. You mean he's going to bankrupt us because of that? Now, understand, we've got Donald Trump in the White House, who's filed bankruptcy legitimately 3 times. And if he gets reelected, we'll owe $900 million to somebody. We don't know who, but $900 million he's going to owe over the next 4 years. But it's going to be Joe Biden who's going to bankrupt us. Never mind each of the last 3 years, we've had $1 trillion plus budget deficits. Never mind that. Don't look behind the curtain. We're just focusing on Joe Biden here. The radical. He's a radical. I had one guy tell me he's a communist. And I was like, wow. I said, so he's not a socialist? Well, yeah, he's that too. And the thing that gets me is, and it's scary on so many levels, that these folks have truly internalized this, and they absolutely, unequivocally believe it. The part about defunding the police, which is just quite amusing to me on a certain level, because out of one hand, they point to, Joe Biden, he wrote that crime bill that was so bad, which you have the African American community going, that locked a lot of people up. It was draconian. That had, 3 strikes and you're out. It had, minimum mandatory sentencing. It had all this stuff that was really, really harsh. Yet on the other side, out of the other side of their mouth is, he's going to destroy the police. Now, look, I support the police when they're right. The middle ground for me is, I don't think we should defund them. I think we should use them differently. I think there's some restructuring we can do, but most certainly not destroy and abolish. When they're wrong, like any of us. And this is one of these weird moments where you can't find, I used to say, and I used to believe this wholeheartedly, that I could sit down and I could talk to anyone and we could agree on stuff. We could find common ground. And interestingly enough, I'm not anymore, because the right wing has done such a masterful job, such an incredible job of hammering home only their message, which is Joe Biden is horrible, he's bad, or any Democrat. They're all pedophiles. They're all horrible. They're all socialists. They're all communists. They're all horrible human beings who want to bite the heads off of children the second they're born. And you go, where do you get this stuff? And the reality is it's right-wing talk radio, and it's all of the websites and all of the fake news and the fake kind of media that they consume, because this is what they put forth. And it got me thinking about how we got here. And, if you saw the mini series on Showtime, the Comey Rule Showtime series, there was a moment where Donald Trump said he likes TV people because TV people have to get ratings. And it got me thinking about that because, the old Rolling Stones song, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. Sadly, we're getting everything that we want, but not what we need from our news sources. We're getting all of our hatred, all of our preconceived notions, all of our stereotypes, all of that stuff confirmed. We're getting all of that 24/7 bombarded at us. And what we need are clear, objective facts. I have people all the time who go, well, you think you're a journalist. I say, no, I'm not a journalist. I do a talk program. I share my opinion of things that I think are credible sourced news items. And I only use what I think are credible sources. I don't use Joe's blog. I don't use conservative ideology blog. I don't use lefty wing blog either. I look at, actual sourced news stories. And I try and use those as my basis. And then I share my thoughts and my opinion. And I hope that people will contact me and do the same. And we can have a discussion around that. And I used to believe that was good, that was possible. Right now, in America, at this moment, you cannot talk with a Trump supporter. You can't. It devolves into just the most bizarre kind of weirdness. And I've tried, and some of the nuggets that I've gotten out of these Trump supporters is, well, I'm voting for him because of the economy. Wall Street wants Donald Trump because the economy's good when Donald Trump's in office, which isn't true. The economy was going down before the pandemic. Fortunately for him, the pandemic hit because we were heading downward anyway. Wall Street, ask any of the big companies on Wall Street, and I hate citing them as a source, but they want a Democratic sweep because this guy's been horrible. And I get union members saying, well, at least I'll have a job. The unions will probably get crushed and they won't be around and I'll work for crap wages, but at least I'll have a job, which is just the most bizarre kind of thinking. Never mind our rights, never mind our freedoms, never mind all of that stuff is going to be corporatized and fixed a price for us to get it. Never mind that. And never mind the fact that the wealthy are going to control everything. I keep going to my friends who, Joe Biden's a socialist. I'm going, but aren't you afraid of fascism? The fact that corporate America is going to control virtually everything we see here, read, and do. And now you've got another person going to be seated on the Supreme Court who is decidedly a corporatist. While the sitting U.S. Supreme Court right now, over the last several years, has decided cases involving the Chamber of Commerce more than 70% of the time in their favor. Amy Coney Barrett has gone even beyond that and reached the heights of 76%. So it's going to get worse. And my most favorite, came out this week. Joe Biden's going to listen to scientists. If you vote for Joe Biden, he's going to listen to scientists. He's going to listen to smart people. And when did we become that country? When did we become the country that hates intelligence, that turns away from someone who's got half a brain? I listen to people talk about Anthony Fauci. And I know Trump, he's one of Trump's favorite whipping boys. But I listen to people say the scientist is wrong, but the game show host, whose tagline was "You're fired," is the guy that they're going to follow into the gates of hell. I mean, it's bizarre, it's crazy, but it's where we are now. Understand, I have some hope. I do. I'm looking at some of the new polling data out, if you believe the polls, and I generally don't put a lot of faith in the polls, but I'm looking at a lot of them, and a lot of them are saying Biden's got a pretty sizable lead. In fact, the most recent Public Religion Research Institute poll, they've come out and said that if we have the same kind of turnout we had in 2016, Biden has a 14-point lead, 54-40. If we jump that voter participation up to 70%, because understand, more people did not vote than voted for either candidate. But if you just jump that up a little bit to 70% participation, Biden's lead expands to 18%, which leads me to go, there are a lot of sane, rational people out there, hopefully. A lot of the people who have been turned off by politics, a lot of the people who I talked to today said, look, I don't want to talk about it. You know, it's all bad. I just want it to stop. I want the pain to stop. And, you know, I've been talking about this for a while because this is what we saw in 2011 and 2012 in Wisconsin and Ohio. People just wanted it to stop. They wanted to live their lives. They didn't care about what Scott Walker was doing back then, and they don't want to think about what Donald Trump is doing right now. They want to go to their kids to their soccer games or their football games. They want to have family dinners. They want to get together, and they want to live their lives. And yet what we have is, well, we have Donald Trump, who at this moment is doing virtually everything he can think of to disrupt the entire political process. And I'm still trying to figure out what he's running on, because every day it's another bit of insanity. Every day it's another attack of someone else. Every day it's another fabrication. Every day it's another, well, myth that the believers jump in the middle of. And I'll tell you, it's scary, scary times. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day the state militia was called into Kincaid, Illinois. 164 high school students had just walked out of the classroom, declaring themselves on strike. They were protesting the school board's use of coal from the Peabody Coal Company. The students walked out in solidarity with their fathers, who were on strike against the Peabody coal mine in nearby Langleyville over wage concessions. The father-son strike, as it was referred to, was one more in a series of protest actions that came on the heels of the founding of the Progressive Miners of America a month earlier. Thousands of Illinois miners had just voted with their feet to repudiate John L. Lewis's UMWA over wage concessions. After their founding conference, new PMA leaders began aggressively organizing non-union mines. They marched into mining towns and ordered non-union diggers out of the mines. They also struck UMWA mines, picketing against the industry standard of $5 a day that had been set by the latest concessionary contract. At some mines, the PMA was able to win the old $6.10 a day wage. Throughout the month, the State National Guard had been called out to a number of mining towns to quell armed conflicts between PMA and UMWA supporters. The Peabody coal mine in Langleyville had been shut down for months by ongoing PMA-UMWA conflict. Now it had reopened under heavy National Guard protection and was the only mine operating in Christian County. The striking fathers were PMA miners picketing the continued mine operations under the UMWA concessionary contract. The years-long Illinois mine wars had just begun. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I had a conservative listener send me an email asking, why I wasn't spending all of my time talking about Hunter Biden and the mystery laptop. And my response was pretty simple. I said because it's unbelievable and it's BS. It's way too convenient and defies logic. And I got a bunch of responses back. So I put this out on Twitter, and my favorite response back was because the FBI is investigating the advancing Russian misinformation situation involving Rudy Giuliani, and we can't comment. Now, I like that comment, but the truth of the matter is it just seems a bit too convenient. Look, I'm a small business guy. I've got a laptop. I would never leave it at some roadside computer shop. I've got an IT guy. You're going to tell me Hunter Biden doesn't? Nonsense. And here to share some thoughts, not just on the Hunter Biden situation, but on all of the Russia-Ukraine stuff we can fill in. I've asked Olga Lautman to come talk with us. Olga is a researcher on Russia and Ukraine, one of my favorite commentators on Twitter. Olga, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the laptop, the mystery laptop that someone just dropped off, and this guy in a roadside computer shop decided he was gonna copy the hard drive. Are you buying it?
No, because first, I don't think Hunter, after stepping down from the board, would go and drop a laptop with incriminating stuff. That just makes no sense. Two, I don't think a private computer shop would call Giuliani. Like, I missed how that happened. I mean, knowing that Giuliani is investigating, well, not investigating, Giuliani's conspiring with Russian intelligence officers to create this, this information. So the whole thing is complete nonsense, and it is so in line with what Russia does. I mean, every election you can expect leaked emails, hacked emails, leaked and fabricated emails. You can expect disinformation, and of course always involving sex, and it's just, I mean, it's so on par with what they've done for like the past, I don't know, 3-4 decades, that no, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, at the end of it, the reality is it just seems too convenient, especially with the timing. And when you see the story that I saw today, that even Fox News passed on it because they didn't believe it was credible. And when it comes out, when it's the New York Post, which is kind of like the National Enquirer of newspapers, in my view, I'm sorry. Right from the start, I was no, I'm not buying it.
And even inside the New York Post, I don't know if you saw that, there was actually dissent because they didn't want to run with the story. I mean, come on, this is complete BS. We're 2 weeks before election. They're literally pulling every trick out of the book. And for Russia, they're doing it for multiple reasons. Obviously, one is to go after Biden and to damage him. But it's also, you notice the narrative, the FBI. I mean, the FBI and the CIA, that's been their enemy for the past, since the 1960s. And they've always had this imaginary, like, deep state who does everything. And I mean, it's literally like, it's their playbook, and they use the same playbook, and people still fall for it.
And the bigger part of this, the bigger part of this, in my view, Olga, is how divided and torn apart we are. We can't have, and I just talked about this a minute ago, I used to have people that I could disagree with, and we could have civil conversations about policy, about the direction the country's going. Now everything devolves into yelling at each other and, throwing platitudes and idiocy and talking points at each other. And we're really divided. And you go, who benefits most from that? Well, the wealth class of our country, obviously, but also I would argue the Russians as well, and the Chinese and the North Koreans and everybody else who hates us.
Well, the Russians, again, I mean, even during Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, they were trying to divide us. They were trying to divide the African American community. So this is nothing new to them. They want nothing more than to see an America implode.
Yeah.
I mean, and they will use every tactic they can with any event that happens. And they study our divisions, then they amplify them. It's, again, all in line with what they do.
It's the same playbook. Now, today, the director of national intelligence, John Radcliffe, came out and said that the Russians had nothing to do with this. And look, I got a bunch of people saying, "See, Rick, you're making things up. The Russians had nothing to do with it." Because all I said was, like you said, it sounds like something that the Russians would get their fingers on.
Yeah.
I don't trust Radcliffe because he's a Trump guy, but I'm curious your thoughts.
And it's even more so because, I mean, look, Christopher Wray is a Trump guy and he's conducting himself very professionally. He's trying to keep the FBI, apolitical, away from all of this, not commenting and actually doing his job. And Radcliffe, I mean, he literally is just a propagandist. That's all he is. He declassified Russian intelligence leaks last month. And for him, his only goal is to serve Trump. It's not to serve Americans. It's not to serve, all the hard working men and women who do everything to protect our country. It's to serve one man. Yeah. And right now he needs to serve Trump and deliver the narrative that Trump wants, which is, the spreading more disinformation. And there are a few of them. I mean, this is the same with Nunes and with Jim Jordan and with, Ron Johnson. There's a handful of people who I mean, clearly they're not doing anything helpful for America, and they're helping Russian intelligence further their attack and actually deliver it to millions of people. I mean, I don't think GRU, FSB ever in their mind, of having such a large audience, and they launder their disinformation on the Senate floor during public hearings, So again, it's disappointing, but not.
Yeah, not surprising. No, I'm right there with you. It's just who they are and what they are. Now, the big story that broke, evidently we've indicted 6 Russians over what they're calling a global campaign of hacking and disruption. I don't foresee anybody actually going to jail over this.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that now this comes out along with this. I mean, it seems like weird timing to me.
Well, it definitely came out today for a reason. My personal thoughts are, one, this GRU unit, I mean, they took down the electric grid in Ukraine. That was one of their first big attacks in 2015. Then they hacked into Macron's emails during election, fabricated the emails, and then released, because Russia will never release completely fabricated. They release 1 truthful with 3 fabricated. So you could say, but this one's accurate, So they were responsible for that, obviously, the Olympic thing in South Korea. My biggest concern was our grids. And I think with this being done, obviously these GRU officers are not going to be indicted. They're tucked away safely in Russia under several identities. But I think it was a message to the Kremlin. 1, do not touch our grids. And 2, do not, continue your attack on our elections, especially releasing fabricated information. And back to the laptop today, well, not today, over the weekend, Durkich, the one who was named by our Treasury as a Russian intelligence officer that's running around with Giuliani, his BFF, and they've been working together literally for a few years. This has been going on since it started 2017, but really ramped up in 2018, creating this whole election narrative around Biden. Durkich, now has another laptop suddenly. So now we're literally 15, 16 days from election, and there are 2 laptops with Hunter Biden stuff, seriously, 1 in Ukraine and 1 here. I mean, it's at this point, it's laughable. I'm hoping that, anyone who thinks for themselves will look at this information and be like, something is very wrong here, that everybody is very intent on taking down Hunter Biden. And Hunter Biden's not even running for election.
Exactly, but it's a way to get at Joe Biden, obviously. Yeah. Hold on. My wife's giving me another laptop. Evidently, we've found a 3rd Hunter Biden laptop that says everything on the other 2 was BS.
Just make sure you mail it to the Kremlin so they can fix it up a little bit, and then
And that's
and then drop it off at another computer shop.
yeah, I mean that's the weird part of all this. But it seems, like I said, it seems illogical, but it seems predictable given the fact that one of the investigations into the unmasking wrapped up with no indictments or no smoking gun. All they've got is one guy. All Durham got out of his investigation was one guy who changed an email, and who knows what something minor he changed. There's no smoking gun as Trump wants, and Trump is clearly ticked at Billy Barr for not coming up with the smoking gun, even if he has to drop off a laptop somewhere. So for me, this is where this all just seems so transparent.
No, absolutely. I mean, right now it's literally they're pulling every trick out of the rabbit hat. I mean, they are replaying Trump on the campaign trails, like replaying, his 2016 greatest hits. Russia's replaying their greatest Russian intelligence hits, and they never change, their narrative, and they never change their methods. They tweak them up a bit, but the point is, you and I are speaking about this. So clearly, we are distracted with this instead of, discussing COVID.
Yeah.
And go into third wave, and we have, a herd immunity strategy that potentially could kill over 1 million people. So this is Russia's goal: to sow chaos, to cause, division, to plant, seeds of doubt, and that way people, will not buy it, but maybe there's something lingering there, like, oh wait, something doesn't. This is what they do, and I mean, expect more. We have 2 weeks. This is not their only campaign. I've been monitoring social media, and Russian social media and American social media, and I can't tell you how busy it is. And it's between undermining our election system, undermining the polls. Your vote is not going to get counted. I mean, it's all BS. It's all to make people, it's to cause big chaos before election.
No, and this is where the other part I wanted to talk to you about, because there is so much disinformation out there. In fact, I've been talking with people about doing mail-in balloting, and there's all of this disinformation around there. And I said, look, I got my ballot delivered to me. I filled it out. I signed it. I put it back in the envelope. I took it and I dropped it off at the elections office. It was quick. It was easy. I love it because it's a hand-marked paper ballot that can be counted over and over again. It was dropped off in a secure location. And I've got people telling me, oh my God, no, they're sending out 100 ballots and they're doing all of this nefarious stuff. And, dead people are voting. And I'm going, no, that's not how it works. But this is part of what you're talking about, isn't it?
This is exactly it, because, and whether it's disinformation on COVID, whether it's disinformation on election security and safety of election methods, whether it's, attacking a candidate, it's to plant the seed of doubt. And again, like if it was 5 years ago and you said I'm dropping off a paper ballot, guess what? Like people will be like, oh, good, can you give me a ride? Like it wouldn't even be a conversation. And here it becomes a conversation. Why? Because this is what they're pushing. And Trump is like literally, their spokesperson at this point, because he pushes all this disinformation that's unfounded.
Right.
And our FBI has come out and put several statements. Voting is safe in America. You could drop off the ballot. You could go in person. Whatever you feel most comfortable. That is the pillar of our democracy.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Olga, because you hit something there that Trump is basically their spokesperson. And I've had this conversation with people who tell me that the whole Russia investigation was all a hoax. There was nothing there. There was the Russians didn't do anything wrong, and Donald Trump was as clean as the driven snow. And I asked them, I go, if the Russians are saying this and Donald Trump is saying this, and they're saying the exact same thing at the exact same time, does it matter if they're talking to each other and colluding to you? And the truth is they don't care. But, is that collusion, or is that coordination, or is it just, they both have the same end point in mind?
No, they're coordinating, because even with the stuff in Ukraine, I had warned people in May about this disinformation attack. And I said, watch it coming from the far right media, the White House, Trump's, inner circle, Giuliani. Manafort, by the way, has his fingerprints all over this. This is his operation. Giuliani's just, he's incarcerated at home. Giuliani's the one running around for him. But, and it's all coordinated. And this is why you see they're always on the same page.
Yeah.
And if they don't specifically talk to each other and say, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we're going to do this, they bounce off each other right away. So if Trump comes out and says, aliens are coming to deliver 10 million ballots, then you're going to see Russian bots pushing aliens are coming to deliver 10 million ballots.
They're not.
But the point is, a real American president would have put an end to this. He would have put them under sanctions, we still haven't even heard. Putin tried to murder Navalny. He poisoned him. He tried to assassinate someone. Europe has sanctioned the Kremlin, his inner circle. We still haven't heard about a word from Trump.
And we're probably not going to. Last question I've got for you. In the last couple of weeks here, what are you paying attention to, and what should our viewers and listeners be paying attention to in the way of the propaganda you expect to be coming? What are you looking for?
And I think people just need to focus, vote, make sure everybody votes. Make sure they go to the poll. If they're voting in person, make sure you have your phone out, videotape if there's any kind of, problems at the polling station, if anyone's trying to block you from voting. Make sure you have the phone numbers. I think right now this disinformation, we have to block it out. For me, I can't because I monitor it.
Right.
But I think for everyone else, the only
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Olga. That's what we need to be doing. And I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Olga, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2013. That was the day that two workers on California's Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART as it is more commonly called, were struck and killed by a train. Christopher Shepard was a BART track engineer. Lawrence Daniels was a contract employee. Both men had years of experience working on the tracks. They were inspecting the tracks when they were hit and killed. Workers who usually operated the trains were out on strike. The Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1555 and SEIU Local 1021 had walked off the job the day before. The strike disrupted the daily commute of 400,000 Bay Area travelers. The unions were on strike for improved wages and safer working conditions. The union wanted bulletproof glass for station agent booths for worker safety. They also asked for improved lighting in the tunnels. According to an article in Mother Jones, quote, a BART spokesman called the safety issues a smokescreen, arguing that contract negotiations were not the place to raise them. In response to the strike, BART was training a replacement worker to run the train when the tragedy occurred. The manager, who was supposed to monitor the unexperienced driver, had left the car. In addition, the National Transportation Safety Board found that BART had no way for workers on the tracks to communicate with the drivers. The family of Lawrence Daniels sued BART, which settled for $300,000. The union and BART settled the strike 2 days after the tragic deaths. The union won nearly a 16% pay raise. The union also won safety upgrades, but management won concessions on employee contributions to medical benefits and pensions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the final debate's coming up. Actually, the second debate, which is the third, but since they canceled the second, it's actually now the third. And now they're complaining about the topic because, well, they want to go after Joe Biden for Hunter. It's all screwed up because, well, Trump's a whiny little bully. And I wanted to use other words, but I'm FCC and all that. So now the commission has decided, and I love this, that they are now going to put mute buttons on each of the candidates. And I said from the beginning, don't just stop at the mute button. Go right to the old game show booths. Put them in the booth. When the light goes on, they can speak. Light goes off, they can speak all they want. Nobody's going to hear them. At least that's my thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the news of the day and also maybe a little talk about the upcoming debate, if it actually happens, which I don't think it's going to. I've asked our good friend Jared Yates Sexton to come talk with us. Jared's the author of American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People. He's also the host of the Muckrake podcast. Jared, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I have to tell you, I was kind of hoping for shock collars.
See, I said that was my very first response, and I got all the dog people mad at me. It's inhumane. Oh, how dare you say such a thing? And I said, but not for Trump. I'm okay if you put that on Trump. I don't put it on my dog.
Let the dogs run free, but let's get the president of the United States under control. That's what I say.
There you go. But I still like my booth idea. Probably not going to happen, and I don't expect there to be a debate if that's going to be the rule.
I wouldn't either. And I mean, between you and me, I don't know how you've been looking at it. If I was in the Biden campaign, I would be honestly, legitimately worried about the president of the United States getting my candidate sick. I mean, he's a biohazard at this point. I wouldn't let Joe Biden within 20 feet of that man at this point.
Yeah, the double. I still love that they had the double panes of plexiglass between Kamala Harris and the other guy, the guy with the fly in his head, Mike Pence. Instead of the one, they were balking at one, so he ended up getting two, which I thought was kind of a good jab in there. But I'm telling you, I would divide them 20 feet high all the way through. You're absolutely right.
I wouldn't get on the stage. I don't think that Joe Biden has anything to gain from this. I mean, the idea of undecided voters at this point is kind of ludicrous. And on top of that, I think Trump, and this idea of muting mics, I mean, Trump is going to get angry to the point of approaching Biden. I mean, that's the kind of thing that he was pulling with Clinton in the first place. And I don't know if you saw him on the town hall debacle, but I mean, that was rage in a way that I haven't seen him rage in 5 years. So yep. I wouldn't get on the stage with him. I wouldn't give him I wouldn't even give him the rub to be in the same place as him.
Yeah, I mean, especially, considering the fact that, and he was on roids. The guy's clearly got some roid rage going on. He's unstable in my view to begin with. Pump in a boatload of the steroids. I don't know.
Yeah, one of my favorite untold stories about this whole thing is how the press didn't report that Trump's steroids that he was taking, one of the main side effects was delusions of grandeur. I really wish that we would have had a larger conversation about that, specifically as he was basically telling his supporters that, his blood cured COVID. So I would really like to have a bigger conversation, but yeah, I wouldn't be in the same place as him for anything right now.
I'm with you, but we had talked about it a little bit. This idea that he got COVID because that's what a leader does, and then God gave it to him because, well, that's what God does, and there's a whole bunch of that insanity, and it plays right into what you're talking about. But here we are in this weird moment, though, Jared, where now we've got this. I got to get into the laptop thing. Where now we've got this laptop, which, I guess I just want to get your thought first. You buying it? You buying that Hunter Biden just dropped it off on the roadside and didn't bother picking it up and put a sticker of his brother on the top of it? You buying any of this?
I think it's as miraculous as Trump recovering from COVID the way that he did. He just happened to take it to the one service guy who had Rudy Giuliani in his speed dial. I find the whole thing, and actually, it's kind of like one of those things where you go see someone in concert and they play the old hits. It's like, Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon doing the old thing. And it doesn't quite sound the same, and it's not quite working as well. It's actually pretty laughable, except for the fact that, of course, the personal lawyer of the president of the United States was trafficking in Russian misinformation and intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is just so preposterous. And You know as well as I do, they're going to try something else in the next couple of weeks. Like they're not going to leave any arrows in their quiver. I mean, this thing is going to get a lot weirder very, very quickly.
No, I'm expecting a lot of craziness. You know, to use your analogy, it's kind of like going like when I got to see the Guess Who. Only they had Kevin DuBrow as the lead singer, the guy from Quiet Riot. Didn't sound anything like the Guess Who, but hey, the name was still there. But here's the thing. I mean, with this laptop, very, very, very predictable. Because as I said in the last segment, they didn't get anything out of the unmasking investigation. Billy Barr and Durham haven't come up with anything. There's no smoking gun. There's no Hillary email. So now we're going to Hunter Biden's emails, which I'm not buying. The story just makes no sense. In fact, it makes so no sense that even Fox News passed on it.
Yeah, and I think Fox News has been bit a couple of times by these conspiracy stories that obviously a lot of them used to get they would test them out on the Alex Jones show or any of the conspiracy podcasts. They would like try and see which ones gain fervor, and then they would bring those out and roll them out, particularly on Fox News. I think that old, dark magic that they've been trying for years, it just doesn't work anymore. And one of the problems in all of this is, well, are you going to talk about sons taking advantage of their political place of their fathers? Well, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump want to have a word with you. I mean, like, there's nothing there. It's like the biggest preposterous conspiracy, and nothing that they're doing gains any traction at this point. Right. It's really kind of pathetic.
No, I mean, if we're going to talk about nepotism, you can go back, every president ever, every vice president ever. I think of Billy Carter. I mean, him and his Billy Beer. I mean, it was nasty swill, but he tried to get something out of it. And even Clinton's brother had a try at a couple of things. So to me, there's just a lot of nothing here. And what it is, it's really what it's meant to do is distract us from what's really going on. The fact is that our economy is not great. Millions of people have lost their health insurance. Millions of people are struggling to make ends meet. There are folks who are about ready to get kicked out of their homes. And just over the weekend, the courts stopped the Trump administration from kicking something like 900,000 people off of food stamps. I mean, there's a lot of real serious issue, and we're talking about an idiotic laptop that somehow Rudy Giuliani got his fingertips all over. It's a great change of narrative.
Yeah, it totally is. And I have to tell you, I really expected our mainstream media to jump all over it and just trumpet it and amplify it. And it felt good that they sort of like blanched from it. It felt like maybe they had learned a lesson, and they don't learn many, just to be frank. Like, they go for this stuff a lot of the time. But I was really happy that this didn't gain all that much traction, and it seemed like just another desperate attempt. But you're right. It's a distraction. I mean, we have seen over the past couple of months, Donald Trump has created an entire operation that is meant to undermine the democratic will of the country. God knows if that's going to play out or if that's going to remain untouched. And this whole thing, it was just one more flailing attempt to try and gain some sort of legitimate push or momentum. And it's just not happening for Trump. I mean, he has no possibility of winning this election at this point. And the only way that he could possibly come out of this in any way, shape, and form is by undermining the vote.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I hate, I want to go there with you. I want to buy some of the polls that say it's this massive gulf between the two. I still fear the court system. I still fear all of the voter suppression tactics that are going on across the country. And like here in Pennsylvania, the big win is they're going to actually count the ballots. And I keep going, for now. What happens when Amy Coney Barrett gets on the court and they go, well, we've changed our mind because now instead of an 8-person court, we're now a 9-person court and a 5-4 conservative decision.
Yeah, I'll say with Barrett, I mean, I think it's become glaringly obvious what has happened, which is the Republican Party understands that they're not a viable party anymore. They're not going to win national elections unless they, disenfranchise voters and keep people waiting in line 10 to 11 hours to cast a ballot. And that's one of the things is I actually feel like our media is kind of missing this point when they talk about, record turnout and these long lines. Well, in order for there to be some sort of actual will of the people have to vote. And I don't know about you, but I don't have 12 hours to stand in line. And most people don't have 12 hours to stand in line. And the last time I checked, we're in the 3rd surge of the coronavirus pandemic. So things are definitely not, this pie is not baked yet. But everything that I've seen, and I've talked to people within the Trump reelection campaign, because we're in the official rats jumping off the sinking ship phase, right? Like they're leaking things left and right, even to people like me. And every poll says that there's no possibility for him to win. I think in the 2016 they said he drew an inside straight. He'd be lucky to get a pair at this point, and I think everybody understands that, but there are tons of ways that he could undermine it. And like you said, the court system is definitely one of them, and they're trying to get Barrett in there as quickly as possible, because I think they understand that there's going to be some sort of litigation and fight that she could be a possible part of.
And even the fact that they've just packed the lower courts with all of these what I would consider fairly unqualified ideologues is scary to me. And again, I go back to, and look, this was the Democrats' fault too, in my view, for undoing the filibuster when they did. To me, this is the consequence of all of that. We now have a packed court with real conservative ideologues, and I shouldn't even say conservative because I don't think they're true conservatives. I think they're corporatists.
It's not actual conservatism.
I think they're corporatists. I think they're all about the money and all about the power. This is an oligarch court. Because I think conservatism is actually dead. There may be a few remnants lying around, but I think for the most part, what we used to think of as conservatism is long dead.
I have started to, because I think what you just said is exactly right. We have to stop giving them the term conservative, because that's actually the veneer that they give to people to try and coat what they actually are. They're white supremacist aristocrats is what they are, and corporatist. And they're and actually a better label for their party at this point would be federalist, because they do not trust the people and they're not interested in democracy or sharing power. They want rule by an aristocratic minority. So I think you're completely right. The conservative nature of this movement is completely gone. It's a total veneer. It's a total and utter lie. And for these people to be in charge, particularly of all of the judiciary and the Supreme Court, I mean, there are going to be massive consequences. And I don't think people have started to wrap their heads around what those consequences are just yet.
No, I've been having those conversations with some of my union friends, and because they'll go, well, why are you voting for Biden? And I said, look, Biden was my fifth choice. There were a lot of people I would have liked to have seen, but Biden is not going to appoint people to the National Labor Relations Board or the Department of Labor who's going to be as destructive. I'm a labor guy. I'm very honest about that. He's not going to appoint people who are going to be as bad as Trump's people have been, because Trump's people have been horrible. The pendulum has swung way to the side of corporate interests and of moneyed interests, and they've actually weaponized the NLRB to the point where labor doesn't even bring cases there anymore because they know they're going to lose, and it's going to set precedent for the future. For me, that's the main point, and undoing all the damage that they've done. And sadly, most people don't get that argument. I think it's a little too nuanced. I think it's a little bit too into the weeds, but it's all of the deregulation and all of the anti-administrative state work that they've done that's going to harm us for at least a generation or two.
So I come from a family of factory workers, miners, laborers. And when I talk to them now about Trump, I don't even want to actually talk about Trump. I want to talk about the fact that corporations and the wealthy didn't give us weekends off and a 40-hour work week out of the kindness of their hearts. Children did not leave the mines and factory floors simply because they thought they deserved an education. And that's something I don't think people understand, is that the people that we're talking about, these corporatists, these hyper-capitalists, they would be more than happy getting rid of public education and pushing our kids back into labor. They've said as much. Newt Gingrich talked about making poor kids mop the floors of their schools to pay for tuition. Like, that's what they actually are. They want to get back to the point where they have complete unfettered access to everyone as long as they want, to pay them as little as possible and give them no rights whatsoever. And that's what we are facing. And those are the actual stakes. It's not just, and by the way, Roe v. Wade is absolutely something we should protect. We should be protecting same-sex marriage. These are things that, like, the left should be standing up for and should be legal in this country. But it goes deeper than that. It goes to how much should you work and how often should you work? And do you deserve basic human dignity? And should children be in a mine shaft?
Right.
That's actually what these people are dealing with.
No, I say all the time, they want to take us back to the days of the Lochner era. Where if you were hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages in desperate conditions, that was your liberty. They've just changed the language a little bit. Now it's your freedom. And some people have bought it. They've bought this freedom of contract argument that is extremely dangerous, because you're right, there are no benevolent employers. They didn't give anything. It was demanded. It was fought for. And I fear my kids and my grandkids are going to have to fight the battles of the 20s and 30s all over again.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate truth, is we have to fight this battle right now. You know, when people want to have conversations about whether or not you pack the court, do you do this with the court or whatever, I mean, the sad truth is the left took their eye off the ball on a lot of these things. And we're talking about everything from local to regional to state politics to this judicial project that the right has carried out. There have been a lot of missteps and a lot of wrong maneuvers. And I think we've watched that. And I think that we've both shaken our head in a lot of this. And they've got, you know, the left turned their back quite a bit on labor and quite a bit on solidarity. And that's what got us here. And now we have to renew that battle. And we have to understand where we made those mistakes. And we have to renew our dedication to solidarity. Otherwise, there's just no turning back.
Now, last line of questioning I've got for you, because, you know, let's say Biden does win, and I'm hopeful, you know, I'm hoping that happens. I don't see Trump going away. I don't see Bannon going away. I see there being a horrible, destructive movement that takes grip of the right even further and becomes even more obstructionist than Mitch McConnell was during the Obama years, and us having some real trouble in the streets. Do you view the future in the kind of the same light that I am?
Yeah, I think we've seen this movie before. I think the first thing that will happen is they will blame Biden for the the deficits that they have created. They'll be calling for an austerity government that will basically gum up the gears completely. Trump will probably form, if he doesn't leave the country in disgrace in the middle of the night, he'll probably form some sort of media company that makes Fox News look like MSNBC. I mean, I think that there's a lot coming. And by the way, white terrorism and white extremists aren't going away. They'll only get worse when they have an adversarial government. So no, I keep telling everyone, it's not enough to simply beat Donald Trump. You have to understand that's the beginning. That's the beginning of the next part of the fight. He is a symptom. He's not the disease. And you have to, and I keep telling people, start figuring out what you want the world to look like after Trump. Yep. That's what people need to start thinking about. What do you want America to feel like post-Trump?
There you go. Good stuff. Jared, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. The book, American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World But Failed Its People, written by Jared Yates Sexton. Jared, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll make sure we get links out on social media, how you can take a look and get the book. Thanks so much. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980, in what the Chicago Sun-Times called the biggest labor management war of the last 2 decades. The battle for union recognition at 10 J.P. Stevens textile plants ended in victory. The Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union led the union's campaign. At the time, J.P. Stevens was the second largest textile manufacturer in the nation. The Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union's campaign targeted 10 of their southern plants. 7 of them were located in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. The company refused to recognize the union. In 1976, the AFL-CIO declared a boycott against the company. But Stevens distributed so many brands that it was difficult to make the boycott effective. The next year, the union began a new tactic, a highly organized corporate campaign. The goal was to put pressure on the banks and financial institutions that dealt with J.P. Stevens. That March, 600 individuals bought 1 share of stock in the company. Hundreds of representatives from union groups, religious institutions, and community organizations supporting the union attended the company's shareholder meeting in New York City. They came to directly confront management. Outside, 4,000 protesters marched in solidarity. In 1979, the struggle inspired the classic labor film Norma Rae. Sally Fields won an Oscar for her portrayal of a woman who helped bring a union to the cotton mill where she worked. The real-life Norma Rae was Crystal Lee Sutton. who was fired for her union activity. She went on to become a union organizer. The union's success at the 10 Southern plants was considered a major victory for the cause of labor. However, Stevens remained vehemently opposed to unions at their other locations. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Sometimes I don't know whether to weep uncontrollably, laugh hysterically, or just throw up. I recently did all three when I saw another gusher of greed pouring out of corporate America. This one is especially nauseating, given today's raging health crisis, for the culprits are major healthcare corporations. One perpetrator is Larry Merlo, CEO of our country's largest drugstore chain, CVS. In this time of COVID-19, customers are surging into the chain's 10,000 stores for everything from medications to masks. Yet, the boss has blithely left many of the pharmacies so severely understaffed that they pose a danger to public health. CVS pharmacists tell of frantically scrambling to keep up with filling prescriptions, answering ever-ringing phone inquiries, giving shots and COVID tests, stocking toilet paper, tending the drive-thru, etc., while also having to meet ceaseless corporate demands for cost-cutting and more profit. The result has been a dangerous work overload, with many pharmacists handling nearly 200 prescriptions in a 6-hour shift, about one every 2 minutes. Unsurprisingly, there's been an alarming rise in serious errors and week-long delays in providing critical medications for customers. Adding to the exasperation of local managers, who are allowed no say in staffing, is the infuriating level of heedless greed at the top. The New York Times reports that while CEO Merlo has failed to fund the staff his pharmacies need, he has generously funded his own needs. He paid himself $36.5 million last year alone. Then there's the mountain of interest payments and fees that CVS is paying to Wall Street bankers and lawyers who engineered Merlo's takeover of the Aetna health insurance giant last year. This is Jim Hightower saying, so while you're being underserved at a local CVS, just remember that bossman Merlo and his merger mercenaries are making a killing.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
If you vote for Joe Biden, you're going to vote for the scientists. And heaven forbid that we actually listen to scientists. Heaven forbid we listen to smart people. No, I want the guy who failed biology telling me how to deal with a pandemic. Just mind-blowing. But here's the weird thing. Everywhere I look, I see Trumpian victims. Every Trump supporter I talk to, it's all they're the victim. And look, they've been, I have to defend them because they've been told they're the victim for so long that they really don't have any other explanation. It's just sad. But I'm stuck on the if you vote for Joe Biden, he's gonna listen to the smart guy. Wow. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on should we listen to the smart guy and this victimhood that I am now finding even more prevalent. I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come share some thoughts with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
We're going to listen to scientists, damn it. How dare we? We don't need that.
Yeah, I mean, if they're saying something that's, a contradiction of what Donald Trump has propagandized them to believe, they're not going to listen to it. They're going to tune everything out that's factual. And I think that's, again, just a way for them to, boost their own ego and puff their own chest out because, again, they don't want to admit that they made a mistake and they voted for a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching one of the shindigs from Nevada, and it kind of, it's one of those things where, I kind of tried to put myself in the audience, and I kind of wondered if it's like a Beatles concert, back in the old days where you were in these massive stadiums and nobody heard anything but mild noise. Right. But hey, you were at the Beatles concert. Because if you listen to what Donald Trump says, how is it possible you could cheer this rambling, moronic, just word salad of nasty? I'm confused.
Well, how many of them were paid to be there? I mean, I think that's the first question you have to ask.
Point.
It's different than a Beatles concert in that, you're not necessarily paying for that ticket. In these instances, they're actually being paid to show up and look enthusiastic and look happy. And again, it doesn't matter what he says. They're all colluding, to create this illusion of he's got this big crowd and they're so into everything he's saying. That I don't think it really even matters what he's saying. It hasn't mattered to them for years
Right.
now, what he says, this whole entire time. It's just that it's a cult, and the cult wants to feel popular. The cult wants to feel like a lot of people agree with them. And as far as they're concerned, within their social network and the people that they interact with on a regular basis and their family, their friends, they are, it's like confirmation bias. They're around people who are saying the things that they're saying and believing the things they believe. And then they turn on the TV and you got Fox News right there, right, affirming most, if not all, of their delusions. So it's a closed circuit, and I think as long as they're having a good time, they don't really care what the outside world thinks about them or how much of a minority they actually are in the court of public opinion.
Now, as they're having their super spreader events.
Right.
Which, if you've seen some of the pictures, you do realize we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And I know that the Messiah up on the stage claims that, somehow he got it, sent down from the mount, or he got it on purpose because I don't know, so his blood can cure it, or whatever the hell nonsense was coming out of his mouth. But the reality is you're packed in like sardines.
Yeah, and I mean, now we're starting to see, I asked this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the rallies, just this rally that he just had in Minnesota. They've already traced at least 20 cases to that rally, and I think 2 of those people were actually hospitalized with very severe COVID. So that's the part that we're not hearing, right? I mean, he blows into town and they have this big rally, but we're not necessarily hearing the stories about the contact tracing that happens afterwards and what really was the impact of that rally on the COVID rate in that local area. And again, I do think that they want to believe that, no big deal. If I get it, I'm going to survive it regardless. And as we were discussing about Chris Christie, they're tuning out these voices like Chris Christie, who's actually saying, hey, guys, I actually was in the ICU. I actually spent, 7 days in the hospital and almost died. But nobody's going to listen to that, right? Because, they've already made this big brouhaha about it's okay to get it, nothing bad's going to happen to you because Trump looks fine.
And the other message that would have gone with that is, well, Chris Christie's weak because he's, a fat guy.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been the message. And again, he actually explicitly said, I should have worn a mask during the debate prep. I didn't. I should have worn a mask at all these other, events that I was at with Trump, and people who have tested positive since. And that was dumb. Don't do what I did.
Yeah. But what is it about people? I mean, maybe you're the psychiatrist. What is it about some of us that just do the dumbest things? And I point to this church in Virginia, where evidently a bunch of the parishioners had their big event, and like 20 or 30 of them got sick with it. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came out of this, and even the people who got it were like, "Oh, it was the best revival ever." You almost died, but it was still worth it. And I guess I'm struggling with that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, they don't believe fat meat is greasy, as we say down here, right? I mean, it does not become real until it affects them personally. And as long as they're not affected personally and they don't end up in the most dire, extreme situation and worst-case scenario, then they're going to turn that into a victory and evidence of their prowess and, how great they are. It's a lack of empathy, first and foremost, where they're not able to just care about the death toll. They're not able to just look and go, wow, over 200,000 people have died from this. This is something that I should take very seriously. As long as they didn't die and no one in their family, that they really genuinely care about died, then they don't care. They're just going to keep plugging away.
Yeah.
And I think, even apart from actually getting sick, I think so many of them, to your point about the victimhood, so many of them are unable to look at the broad range of impacts of the pandemic. Okay, maybe you didn't get sick, but how has your life changed? Are your kids in school? Do you have a job? Are you able to go out and do the things that you used to be able to do? And I think for most people, the case is that no, they're not able to do things as they were doing them. But again, with these anti-maskers, for them, they're just still, think about it. We're 7 months into this, more than that at this point, probably somewhere between 7 to 9. But in terms of the actual lockdown, so many of these people haven't abided by any of that.
Right. No.
They haven't worn masks. They're living in a completely different reality.
And, the reality is that's what Trump's spiel was about when he said that, Biden's going to listen to scientists is, we're tired of the masks. We're tired of social distancing. We're tired of all this, and we're going to plow right through it.
Yeah.
As I predicted he would do back, in February and March, that was ultimately going to be what we were going to have to do because we're really just a screwed up society.
Yeah, we're blowing this, atrociously. And you look at New Zealand, you look at around the world at these places that have gotten it under control, and it's so clear that it's the lack of leadership that's really setting us back. The CDC, which, is world-renowned, is basically in the dumps right now. Nobody can trust what they're saying because of the leadership. Everyone knows that leadership across the board is failing in America, and that's why this has been our abysmal response to the pandemic.
Right.
But again, that tuning it out, that tuning out science, tuning out facts, that's all information that basically proves the lie that, Trump actually is a complete disaster. He's not a successful business person. If he's running America the way he ran his businesses, right, that he, went bankrupt 6 times, then this was the predictable outcome. America is going to fail, just as much as Trump has failed at anything else in his life before he became, the fake president of the United States.
Clearly, we got a $3.1 trillion budget deficit. Now, a good bit of that is the pandemic, obviously, but still it was going to be well over $1 trillion without the pandemic.
Right.
As it was $1 trillion the year before and the year before. And this was the guy who told us he was going to solve our budget deficits. He was going to pay off our debt. Everything was going to be great. We were going to give these tax cuts to rich people, and you got a couple of pennies too. And it was going to all pay for itself, and it was going to do all of this stuff. And it did none of that. It just increased our debt.
Exactly. And, I don't know if you saw this tweet from Kirstie Alley saying that, she's voting for Trump because he's going to fix the economy and he's going to fix all these things. And it's like, wait a minute, lady, do you realize that he's the one that caused all of this?
Yeah, see, you lost me at Kirstie Alley. The second you said her name, I'm going, what kind of craziness is coming next? And I'm not even going to justify it with a comment. I'm going to put that into the same world as Hunter Biden left his laptop at some roadside computer shop to have some guy clone his hard drive and ship it over to Rudy Giuliani. I put each of them in the same category.
I do too, but the thing that's so bizarre about it is, when you see these matchups in terms of, who do voters trust on this X, Y, and Z thing, voters, are trusting Joe Biden on everything, and then they're giving points to Trump and saying, he actually is the one. They're giving him points for the economy. That's the one area where people are, thinking he would do a better job than Joe Biden, right? And it's insane. Just to even think about it in those terms when we know the economic situation we're in right now and how we got to this point. But I think time and time again we see that the Republicans, they inherit this reputation that they're so much better on the budget and the deficit, despite the facts showing that that's not the case, that every time they get into office, they plunge us into a recession depression.
Yep.
And then it's Democrats that have to come back in and clean it up. But I think that, in this moment, there's still that tendency for whatever reason to ascribe some positive qualities to Trump and for it to be the economy. And I think the media has done a very piss-poor job in just laying what the facts actually are, how many people have slipped into poverty. 8 million people are now in poverty. 8 million more people are now in poverty than were, before this pandemic started.
Yeah, but sadly, we don't care as long as it's not us.
Exactly. But again, I think that goes back to your point about the victimhood, in the sense that a lot of these Republican voters, particularly in these rural areas, and also, across the Rust Belt, are actually suffering socioeconomically. They don't have good health care. They don't have good, stable jobs. They're not being paid, even if they do have a stable job, they're not necessarily being paid a living wage that's keeping up with inflation and the cost of living now. And so in many ways, they do feel victimized, but again, they are not ascribing the blame to the people who are actually putting them in that position. Rather than going, hey, I keep voting Republican, I keep putting Mitch McConnell, into this position, and this is what happens to me. The people in Kentucky aren't voting that way, right? I mean, they're not thinking about, hey, we expanded Medicaid, and now we don't have that anymore, and look at who we've sent. They're not making that connection because, again, the LBJ quote, right? They are feeling better than, black people, brown people, immigrants, women, LGBTQ. They're feeling superior in terms of their white privilege, their skin privilege, even though they may be dirt poor, but they are at least feeling superior because they know they have a white supremacist in the White House. And so they don't necessarily feel victimized by the economic policy. They feel victimized by the change in culture, the demographic change, people who they feel like shouldn't have rights suddenly now having more rights in our society. That's what they feel victimized by. They may not say it, they may not articulate it to you because I think a lot of them are aware that that makes them sound like a bigot. So again, it has to be this very nebulous, just, the country's going in the wrong direction and, this isn't how things are supposed to be. But ultimately, I think that's what's at the root of it. And they're going to continue to feel victimized because they're emptying out their pockets.
Yeah, but, and I look at over the weekend, there was a federal judge who blocked the administration from ending the food stamp program that benefited, I think it was like 700,000 people.
Yeah.
And it didn't get a lot of coverage, didn't get a lot of story,
Right.
because, they're just poor people. And,
Right.
those are the people who vote for McConnell, oddly enough.
Right. Exactly. I mean, in all of these red states, in all of these rural areas, so much of what, has become apparent to me as a psychiatrist, particularly working with underserved populations and people who live in poverty, is how many of those patients are white, particularly in the state of Texas, right? I mean, I'm in Houston. Certainly I see people from all walks of life, but the amount of white people that are in poverty across this nation, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about, when people, I think most people, and not even just white people, I think black people think of it this way too, because it's in our collective, history about ourselves that we've been taught, that people imagine when you talk about food stamps, when you talk about welfare, when you talk about people being, on government assistance, the brain imagines a black person or a Hispanic person. It doesn't imagine the white person, the white people that make up the majority of people on the rolls receiving government assistance.
Yeah. No, when I think of it, I think about how humiliated I was as a kid to have to use the clown money at the local store when that evil woman who, if someone would tell me where they buried her, I'll dig her up so I can kill her again. But I still remember it. I was 8 years old, walked in with one of the cartoon money bills, and this woman just made the biggest scene in the world, and it was the most humiliating thing that I want nobody to have to go through, just so that we could have food on the table, because the 1970s was not a good time for a single mother in the workforce. And look, the jobs aren't there now. We've done nothing since that era to help people get the child care that they need, and now during the pandemic it's even worse. We've done nothing to make. We hear a lot of people who are pro-birth, man. I'm hearing ads all the time about how the Democrats want to kill babies as soon as they're hatched. But I don't hear anybody going, hey, well, how do we make sure we feed everybody and get the education they need and the health care they need and so on.
Yeah.
I never hear that. I hear the pro-birth people We want to make sure they're hatched. But once they are, you're on your own.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the shame that is attached to needing a handout, is how they call it. Needing a handout, needing that assistance. I think that, it goes along with those epithets like white trash, and words that people don't, want to assign to their own selves. And I think that in this society, even the people who actually rely on these benefits will actually vote against them, because in many ways they're ashamed to actually need them. They want to be this rich millionaire, billionaire. They vote for what they imagine and desire to be. They don't necessarily vote for where they actually are in life at this particular point.
Yeah. No, I said this about, during the Romney presidential run, when he said, 47% of people don't pay federal taxes.
Right.
I go, that means there are 47% of people who would love to pay federal taxes. I would love to pay the top marginal tax rate. Even during the Eisenhower years, I would have loved to have paid the top marginal tax rate, because that would have meant I'm rich as can. I'm making $1.6 million a year in today's dollars to pay that 92% on that next dollar. That means I've got a boatload of cash.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I think that, people are thinking in that mindset of, I have all this money, I want to keep it to myself, I don't want to share it with other people, especially not people that I don't like and I don't have anything in common with. And so they're identifying with that scarcity, and it becomes a hunger game where it's everything for me and screw whoever, gets left behind. And again, I think that residue of the Southern strategy of welfare queen and using words like that, takers, I mean, every single Republican that's been at the top of the ticket has used that type of language and that imagery because it works like Pavlov's dogs on the GOP base.
Yeah.
They know it works, and they know that those voters are going to vote against themselves, and that they're not going to blame the Republican Party for what happened. I also think, in terms of the Hunter Biden story, I've been thinking about this a lot too. Not so much about the emails because certainly, it's more of what they did in 2016, and certainly that's the biggest piece of the story. But I think the aspects where, they are castigating him and judging him and shaming him, Hunter Biden, for his substance abuse, for his addiction, again, it's so hypocritical to me because, again, as what we've seen from the opioid epidemic that we've had raging over the last decade is that this is an epidemic that is disproportionately affecting white people in rural areas, in the suburbs.
Rush Limbaugh.
Exactly, Rush Limbaugh. I mean, these patients that I have coming in, their families are these families that are going out and voting against themselves. They're wondering why they don't have the necessary treatment for their family member, why they can't keep them in rehab for 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, per the standard of care. Well, it's because you keep voting against that. And this I think, in terms of the religiosity and the fundamentalism where they think about addiction as a moral failing, again, it goes very starkly in contradiction to what is actually happening on the real, on the ground.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because, I've been hearing a lot of that because I spend a lot of time talking to voters and doing some get out the vote efforts. And it's amazing to me the recurring messages that I keep hearing from the people who are clearly Trump supporters.
Yeah.
One of them being the, Hunter Biden was a drug addict. And I'm going, have you looked at Eric Jr.? Have you looked at Eric and Jr.? And not that I'm shaming anybody, but, as my mother always said, you don't point your finger at somebody because you got three pointing back at you.
Exactly.
Also, the other frame that keeps popping up, and this seems to be, her emails was 2016. Everyone's now a pedophile. Today,
Right.
Everyone's a pedophile. And while there are some, and I say we call them out and we do what needs to be done with them, preferably in public square with a stick, but now everybody's a pedophile. The number of times I've heard someone call Joe Biden a pedophile, I could pay that 92% tax, making $1.6 million a year, because it's just ridiculous.
projection. I mean, everything they are accusing Biden of is something that Trump has actually, in many ways, credibly been accused of. The corruption, I mean, this man is an impeached man. He was impeached for corruption. He was impeached for colluding with, foreign actors to interfere in our election. These are real things that happen. His family, I mean, Ivanka Trump, the Trump organization, I mean, the levels of corruption that are there within the nepotism go so deep that as long as they are pointing a finger at Joe Biden and his family, you're not talking about the Trump crime family. As long as he's calling Biden's family a crime family, it's not in the news that his family is indeed a crime family. The same thing with the pedophilia. I mean, he's been credibly accused of sexual assault by over, I think it's somewhere up to 18 women, 13 to 18 women, depending on, whether they're giving the allegations any validity. We know that he had to pay out to Stormy Daniels. We know that the links between him and Jeffrey Epstein, right? There's all of this pedophilia that's swirling around even the Trump orbit.
Yep. Well, no, I mean, there's the tapes of him talking to Howard Stern about when he ran Miss Teen USA, and he was in there checking out the talent as they were changing.
Exactly. And so I think these are things that the Trump campaign knows are weaknesses for him. And certainly his voters know that these are weaknesses for him. So they're just going to accuse the other guy of doing the same thing and doing it worse. It's always protection with them.
Which I found interesting, the story that came out today, that the Department of Justice is they're evidently arguing that Trump can't be or shouldn't be personally sued for denying the rape accusation by this writer E. Jean Carroll, because evidently he denied it in official capacity as president, which I just don't at all get.
It's a steaming pile of crap. That's why.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. And it's insulting. I mean, again, this is another episode of him using the office, abusing the power that he has been given to evade the law and to evade consequences. He's going to continue to do that until we vote him out.
Yeah, and hopefully that comes on November 3rd. Last question I've got for you, because we're in this moment of, I've had instances where people want to fight. I had an instance where someone called the police on me because they claimed I threatened them. There's just been all of this tension where we're really polarized.
Yeah.
Is there any way back from that? I mean, because I'm looking at some of these guys are my union brothers and sisters, who we're really ripped apart.
Yeah.
Is there hope in the new world for on the other side if Joe Biden's elected? Because I don't know. I see Trump starting Trump TV and Bannon, doing his shtick, and there being constant chaos and tension and white supremacist rallies all the time. I see this getting progressively worse. Give me some hope.
Well, you're talking to a Southerner, so I don't know how much hope I can give you. I can give you the historical context that after the Civil War, I mean, things were still polarized. Things have continued to be polarized for 150 years since then. I think we've certainly, pushed it to the edges, right? And it's not necessarily just blaring at us in our faces every day. But I think that America has been a divided nation for over a century now. And I think the way that you move past it is you vote, you get people into office that are going to uphold, our democracy, and you do what's right. You abide by the Constitution. You hold people accountable, and you don't just let them have their guns, have their, corruption, have whatever's left, have this corrupt media that's lying all the time. I mean, we have to actually get to the source of the problem. If you have an infection, you have to get down to the infection and root it out, or your body's not going to heal from it. And I think that, this hopefully will be a turning point. It is probably going to get uglier before it gets better, sadly. But I think for those of us who do care and do want America to be better than it's ever been, we have to kind of, hunker down and realize that the fight is really only beginning. and we have to stay engaged, because it's when we get disengaged and apathetic that it turns into a disaster. We have to constantly be working for our democracy. We have to constantly be fighting to, expand rights in this country. And as Barack Obama always said, to make it a more perfect union. It's not perfect, and our job each generation is to continue to build on it and make it more perfect over time.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, Jane, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Have a good week and be safe.
You as well, our good friend Propane Jane. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Hurricane Delta is the 10th named storm to make landfall this year. Hurricane season has nearly 2 months to go. Climate change? What climate change?
Cleanup and recovery begin in battered Louisiana in wake of Hurricane Delta. Plus,
let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat.
Climate change in the spotlight at the one and only 2020 vice presidential debate.
Yay!
And that's not saying much.
Boo! All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
On the subject of climate change, Pence made another hollow promise.
We're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
We will follow it, and once it is asleep, we will smother it with a pillow. It will look like an accident. This much I swear.
No swearing, Mike. This is your Green News Report. Hey, Desi Doyen.
Yes.
At the vice presidential debate, not only did they bring up climate change, but they brought it up in like the first half hour or so. You got to be happy about that.
Well, yes, it's true that the vice presidential debate had a solid 7 minutes about climate change, but it was not an actual substantive debate on either climate change or policy. So, yeah, no, not really.
Nothing is ever good enough for you people, is it?
It can be way better.
Uh-huh.
But first,
okay,
recovery and cleanup operations are underway in beleaguered, storm-weary Louisiana in the wake of the destructive Hurricane Delta, which slammed into the state on Friday night as a Category 2 hurricane near Lake Charles. Delta hit just a few miles from where Hurricane Laura made landfall just 6 weeks ago, stripping off blue tarps from damaged homes. 3 deaths are linked to the storm. The Washington Post reports that ravaged municipalities are still awaiting word from FEMA on whether they will receive full reimbursement for costs incurred during these 2 hurricanes and how much federal aid they can count on. Delta was the first Greek-named storm to hit the U.S. in recorded history and the 4th to strike Louisiana in 2020.
And why was it a Greek-named storm?
Because we ran out of English-named storms, and now we're into the Greek alphabet.
Cool. What happens after the Greek alphabet?
Armageddon?
Yeah.
Driven by record warm ocean temperatures, Delta broke the record for the fastest intensifying storm in the Atlantic basin. Climate scientists say man-made climate change is increasing the intensity and the frequency of the most dangerous hurricanes. So keep those facts in mind as you hear Republican Vice President Mike Pence at the sole vice presidential debate of the 2020 election held last week in Utah deflect questions about climate science and lie about policy. Moderator Susan Page of USA Today did not ask Pence about the Trump administration's persistent denial of the scientific consensus on climate change. She did not ask about the administration's rollbacks of more than 100 pollution and climate regulations or about Trump's lack of any climate policy. Instead, she went retro to ask Pence if he believed the scientific community.
The climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science.
Mike Pence, partying like it's 1999.
Scientists, of course, know what causes climate change, and we know what to do about it, but voters did not hear those solutions. Throughout the debate, Pence ignored questions and instead pivoted to repetitive talking points, invoking the Green New Deal 11 times as if it were a mantra, even on unrelated topics. And he flat out lied about Joe Biden's position on fracking. Senator Kamala Harris defended Biden's positions.
I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact.
That is a fact because a president can't ban fracking. Only Congress can do that. But a president can regulate it, which Biden has pledged to do. Also, banning fracking isn't really the point. No one banned coal mining, but it is going away anyway because of market forces. Harris then linked Trump's dismissal of climate science to his failed response to the pandemic that has killed more than 210,000 Americans.
We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs.
Senator Harris missed an opportunity to detail Biden's $2 trillion plan to create jobs by transitioning the nation to clean energy, or how it differs from the proposed Green New Deal framework. Polling is extremely consistent that voters overwhelmingly favor climate action, and they do not trust Trump and Republicans to do anything on climate policy. It's unclear if voters understand that Trump and Pence have no plans to address climate change, and with the corporate media still stuck at square one asking candidates about their beliefs, voters are still not getting the substantive climate policy discussion they need and deserve.
Is that it?
That's it.
That was very good.
Okay.
It was like watching the vice presidential debate all over again, except without all of the boring parts and, of course, without the fly. Other than that, nice job. For much more on these stories and the ones we couldn't get to because of them, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in addition to the polling that seems to be getting wider and wider with Biden in the lead, Rolling Stone magazine has come out and endorsed Joe Biden, stating that Donald Trump is categorically unfit to be president. You know it's bad when Rolling Stone's coming out and giving you that kind of a statement. I'm waiting for the Wall Street Journal to come out against him. Maybe then. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. And in Washington, D.C., our good friend, former Congressman, political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So Rolling Stone saying categorically unfit, not just unfit, but categorically unfit to be president.
Well, I think that, of course, with the Rolling Stone, I mean, I like the magazine. Some people will say, well, okay, that's a magazine that's going to do that. It'd be like maybe the New York Times. But I think if you look at, there was a list published, for example, 3 days ago of former members of Congress, Republican. I knew a lot of people on the list. And then you see that, and you start to say, wow. I mean, it was probably, Rick, about 20-some people on that list.
Yeah. No, I
but
mean,
it's not something you want from the Rolling Stones, a magazine, obviously,
Yeah, I'm waiting for, the slew of other endorsements to come out for Biden. Because, look, I don't know how you can look at Trump and go, yeah, we want 4 more years of this craziness. Unless you're Fox News and the places that need him. I can't imagine how you can look at the last 4 years and go, yeah, I want to go through this again.
Well, of course, he does have supporters. And I was actually telling a close friend of mine the other day who did a broad categorical swipe at all Trump supporters. I said, you really don't get into the despicable deal that there are people that are torn and maybe don't even like him, but they're torn maybe for other reasons of voting for Biden. I said, so be cautious about that part of it.
No, you're right, because there are some things that look, I'm not 100% sold on Biden. There are some things that I've got problems with, and I've said it before. His position on trade over the years has been very troubling. The fact that at the beginning of the campaign he said that he didn't think China was a problem. I have some problems. But I also believe that Biden's movable to sanity. When you have a guy like Trump who comes out and says, if you vote for Biden, he's going to listen to scientists, that makes me go, yeah, I want to listen to I want to vote for the guy who's going to listen to scientists.
Well, yeah, but like I said, part of the problem is that in the remaining time, if I go back to the Despicables. They just don't want to do the Despicables deal,
right?
But I think with Trump, look, he's lost 24% of his senior support. He's lost a lot of Republicans, a lot. Officially, he's lost a lot. They come out against him, and it's over. From what I've seen, everything from what I've seen, it's over behavior, not policy, as much as behavior.
Well, because they don't know the policy. Nobody's really covered the policies that he's moved forward on. They haven't really passed much legislation, and everything that they've done has been deregulatory stuff that is going to take a little while for it to become apparent. And I'm going through this with a lot of my labor friends, trying to explain to them some of the decisions that have come out of the National Labor Relations Board that have swung the pendulum of power even further to the side of corporate interests and away from workers and away from, collective bargaining, and making it easier to decertify and making it easier to punish stewards and fire, union officials. I mean, it's bad, and it's gonna be with us for a while. And I know it's nuanced and I know it's hard to understand, but it's something that very few people are ever talking about. We're talking about the cult of personality and the sideshow that is the Trump show.
Right, and then also, for example, I mean, there's things people may care about or not care about, but on an issue that nobody covers, the amount of the marriages that have been declined at embassies around the world. Filipino, if you marry a Filipino, it's went down to 63% chance that they'll be ever allowed to come here to America. Somebody you marry.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. India, of every 5 qualified students who want to come to our colleges to pay for their education and then go back, and and obviously, how many times have Indian students committed crime over here? You can't name it. Of every 5 that walks in, three don't make it, and they're not given the reason they're rejected. I mean, I can go on and on. So you've got that, which is the silent stroke of a pen somewhere that told the embassies around the world, no. If they want to come here legitimately, no. At least, make sure half of them don't do it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: when you bring something up like that, you immediately get, well, we don't want them anyway. Shut down the borders, keep them out of here. We want those spots for our kids. Immediately, you get that Hunger Game mentality.
Yes, I agree. But you also have gotten people so stuck. I'm talking about Republicans. I know Republicans who have gotten married and cannot bring their spouses here. They've been trying for 3 years now to bring their spouses that they married, and because that's who's called me to say, hey, where do you think I go from here? And I say, get a lawyer.
Yeah. No, it's who you voted for, but it's this kind of stuff that our media doesn't really pay attention to, and I don't know that we ever really did. A lot of this stuff happens, and it goes unnoticed. But there's been so much of an attack on the regulatory state, on the administrative state, that I think it's going to be years before we realize the damage that this administration has done.
Well, you're right. There are regulatory functions that have been altered, and some of them have barely made any media attention because there's so much other, everything else going on, or something the president says that's outrageous. And then within these agencies, there's been all kinds of changes. And I don't think that you can even begin to to analyze what's happened, because some of it we just don't even know what they've done. Something happens, you say, well, why did that happen? Oh, well, because there was a change the administration put out. It wasn't even an executive order, Rick. It's a cabinet member of the president saying, do this.
No, it's the person they put in charge of that.
Don't need executive order.
And this is what I've been, people are going, why are you voting for Joe Biden? And I go, it's the people that he's going to put in charge. Because immediately anyone says, oh, you're going to vote for Joe Biden, that pedophile. And I'm going, Joe Biden's not a pedophile.
Right.
But, again, it's immediate to that extreme. And I said, the reality is he's going to put good people into positions that I feel more confident than I feel with Trump and the people that he's put in there. The swing has been too far to the moneyed interests and to the corporate interests, and it's getting worse.
Well, now also think about something. This is fascinating. Normally, in a case like this, we might even say, well, all this right-wing, things he's done. Actually, you've got some Republicans that don't like him because he's done things that even they don't agree with.
Right.
Think about that for a second.
No, I mean, there are a couple of things in the TRUMPTA, the new NAFTA, that there's no way a Republican would have ever signed. The end of the investor dispute settlement system, which I gave them credit for, and labor pushed hard for it.
Right.
They pushed hard for independent unions in Mexico. We'll see. There's no teeth into it, but right. Even the statement, Republicans would have never gotten behind that.
Right.
And I agree, there are some things, and which is why I've said, and I've taken heat for it, I wouldn't be all that upset if he won and the Democrats took over the Senate. Because ultimately, I think he'll sign whatever you put on his desk, because he doesn't have any core values. He just wants to have, people say nice things about him and have the little parties and the pomp and circumstance and play the role. I truly believe that.
Oh, yes. If you look at the stimulus package, he offed the package. He said, I'm done. It's off the table. We're done till after the election. And basically indicated to the House, via Speaker Pelosi, indicated, well, we'll go 1.8 trillion and above if you want. And, well, we don't know what will be in it, but we could do that. And then it alarmed McConnell, the leader of the Senate, to the point where he said, well, I don't care what you come up with. We're not doing it. But look at that offer.
Yeah.
They left it open for really the House to write it if they wanted to.
No, it reminds me of a story that I have a friend who was he was one of the negotiators for the USFL, for the Players Union, for the USFL, if you remember them. Back years ago, the New Jersey Generals and, the football league that Trump owned one of the teams. And he tells the story of how all the owners were in a room and the negotiations weren't going anywhere. And Trump walked in and just blew everything up and ended up giving away all kinds of stuff that was really great for the players. And all the owners were just beyond ticked off. And he had no idea what he had done. But, being from New York and having the New York area team, he didn't care and ended up basically what they say brought down the league as they overpromised. And he was the one responsible for that. But this guy, he told me this story of how he just came in and blew everything up, gave away whatever he wanted because he wanted people to say nice things about him, and that is played true throughout this presidency.
Yes, of course. I mean, there's an ego, thing here that occurs, and if people haven't seen that by now, they can't see anything. I mean, it's sort of, as people know who are close to the president, it's sort of who complimented you last, who touched you last.
Yeah.
That's who wins.
Who was nice to you. It's crazy. Right. Now, Thursday is supposed to be the big debate. There's been some back and forth. Trump wants to change the topic. They want to. They don't want. I guess they're mad about the mute button, because I guess there's going to be a mute button now.
Yes.
Do you think it happens? Do you think there's a debate Thursday?
Yes, I think there'll be a debate Thursday because the president is behind. He can't afford not to. Now, if I'm wrong here, he can't afford not to do this, but he may. It's Trump. He may just say, "I'm not doing it." If he does, that's a huge mistake. Just like when he pulled the stimulus off the table right before the election.
Yeah.
Huge mistake. Just like he has now went off on tangents all over the place instead of a mantra. Huge mistake. Just like he's not narrowing Biden down on China. Huge mistake. So is it possible he'll do that? You never know. But he should debate no matter what, no matter the conditions, because he is behind. And, you know, I have people refer to Hillary Clinton at 11 points ahead and then tanked. Well, also we have to remember other factors of Hillary Clinton, you know, staying out of Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton thinking she won Pennsylvania, and also head of an FBI who within days of the election said, okay, yeah, she's clear, after he launched something on her 10 days before the election. We don't have that scenario right now.
Yeah, but they're trying, man. They're trying.
Well, yes, of course, with Hunter Biden, but they don't have the guts at this point in time to have the Justice Department tomorrow morning, Barr come out and say, you know, we're going to take Hunter Biden to a grand jury, you know, or whatever. They know they can't do that. That would be a late tactic that would backfire big time.
Yeah.
So that comparison of Hillary Clinton 11 points ahead, in this case right now, I'm not saying that they have to have a Hail Mary. All they need is a couple fumbles, let's say, but the fact remains that the president is behind. That's just the fact of life.
Yeah. The laptop, you know, you've been around this game a long time.
Right.
Thoughts? You buying it?
Well, first of all, if you look at this, we have to then believe that Hunter Biden went to a place that charges $89 to fix your laptop, and he, you know, actually went across country, I would assume, because there was no place close to him in L.A. that fixed laptops. I mean, I can go on and on. It's just not a plausible scenario that he did this. If Rudy Giuliani would agree to forensics on the evidence he has, then we might talk a different ball game here. They won't.
Yeah.
So it just, when you look at it, I just don't see it, you know, adding up. Now, when this first came out, you know, which I think is appropriate to do, you know, I held my powder dry because I wanted to see, you know, is there something to it at all? You know, you want to see that or not. Even though it's so close to the election, it was such a preposterous, you know, story that I thought, well, okay, you know, let's still see. I think that once you analyze it, it's not there. It's not there.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Just crazy. But again, you know, we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. But Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend, former Congressman, political analyst Bob Ney. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2013. That was the day that two workers on California's Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART as it is more commonly called, were struck and killed by a train. Christopher Shepard was a BART track engineer. Lawrence Daniels was a contract employee. Both men had years of experience working on the tracks. They were inspecting the tracks when they were hit and killed. Workers who usually operated the trains were out on strike. The Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1555 and SEIU Local 1021 had walked off the job the day before. The strike disrupted the daily commute of 400,000 Bay Area travelers. The unions were on strike for improved wages and safer working conditions. The union wanted bulletproof glass for station agent booths for worker safety. They also asked for improved lighting in the tunnels. According to an article in Mother Jones, quote, a BART spokesman called the safety issues a smokescreen, arguing that contract negotiations were not the place to raise them. In response to the strike, BART was training a replacement worker to run the train when the tragedy occurred. The manager, who was supposed to monitor the unexperienced driver, had left the car. In addition, the National Transportation Safety Board found that BART had no way for workers on the tracks to communicate with the drivers. The family of Lawrence Daniels sued BART, which settled for $300,000. The union and BART settled the strike 2 days after the tragic deaths. The union won nearly a 16% pay raise. The union also won safety upgrades, but management won concessions on employee contributions to medical benefits and pensions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I remember that story my friend Doug had told me about the negotiations with the USFL. But I remember this goes back to the early 80s when the USFL was trying to compete with the NFL, and they were going to play spring football. And they ended up, drafting, some pretty big name people like Jim Kelly and Herschel Walker. I remember, I think we're both on the New Jersey Generals team. And they spent a boatload of money and over leveraged themselves and did all kinds of stuff that, they were trying to make themselves relevant. And ultimately they ended up, because Trump had his fingers all over it, ended up, basically just collapsing the whole thing and a bunch of people losing a boatload of money. But it was all about Trump. It was all about him slapping his name on it. It was all about making him, the next big name. And it's just interesting that there's some stories out there about, how what Trump did with the USFL is exactly what he's doing now. It's all about him. It's about what's next. And it's about, using it as a stepping stone, to enrich himself. And I really see that as something that's coming. Now we'll see what the Southern District of New York does, but this is very Trumpian. And I'm not surprised by what we're seeing, and I expect more. I expect more craziness in the coming days because these folks are cornered. They know they're going to lose, and as Jared said in the first hour. They're now leaking stuff. They're now looking for their next gig. They're now looking to how they're going to insulate themselves from prosecution. Now, understand, I don't believe Joe Biden's attorney general is going to pursue Donald Trump at all. I believe Biden will do as Obama did with the Wall Street people, as Clinton did with the H.W. Bush people. They're going to go, it's over, we're done, we're going to put it behind us, and we're going to move forward. We're not going to do political prosecutions like Trump really wants to do. And if there was evidence out there, they would do it. Problem is there's no evidence. So they just keep making these allegations. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is I saw a clip of Steve Bannon, talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. You now figure out that the reason that this story was out there was to get the Biden campaign or Hunter Biden to sue the New York Post. The idea is sue somebody and then open them up for disclosure or for discovery. And as anybody who follows any of this stuff knows, that could take years of dragging out all kinds of stuff. And that's really what I expect for the 4 years if Biden is elected. And I'm, like I said, hope he is. You're going to see the moneyed interest pour into people like Bannon. You're going to see these right-wing outlets that have been doing the fake news and the propaganda on hyper steroids. The moneyed interests, they don't like to lose. And they're going to continue doing what they've been doing, which is divide us. I'm hoping at some point we can get back to a place where we can have civil discussions and disagree. Ideologically, I disagree with people on policy issues. And I want to talk about how are we going to move our country forward. That's not what they're about. They're about divide and conquer. At least that's my view on it. I'd love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big week ahead. Cannot wait. We'll see you back here next time.
Together, power when we organize. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The big news this week, at least in my state of Pennsylvania, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a deadlocked 4-4 decision, denied the Pennsylvania GOP's application to stay the state Supreme Court's decision to allow Pennsylvania to, wait for it, actually count the votes. I mean, and it's big news. The fact that the U.S. Supreme Court decided that we should actually count the votes. Now, understand, the decision is any postmarked ballot, if it's postmarked on November 3rd, it can be counted 3 days after. So November 6th, everything has to be in. So remember, don't wait until the 3rd to get your ballot in. Get it in as soon as possible. Please, if you're going to mail it in soon, or better yet, go and drop it off. The ruling also states that ballots that don't have a postmark on the envelope have until November 6th to be counted. Now, they say unless there's I forgot how they put it, a preponderance of evidence that demonstrates that it was mailed after election day, or was gotten somehow after election day. Now, the reason that they did this, and look, the Republicans in Pennsylvania are losing their minds. That how dare John Roberts, a good Republican conservative, stab us in the back like that. The reason is there could be transport. There could be something that went on in the drop locations. There are 67 counties in Pennsylvania. Each has a different election office. And getting them to a centralized location is time. I'm okay with that. As long as the names are there, as long as everything's square, we're good. And this is one of these moments where you go, remember who's screaming today. Remember the people who are complaining right now. They're going to be the people who cheerlead Amy Coney Barrett once the Republicans ram her onto the Supreme Court when she denies the right to count votes. Because, look, Republicans wanted to stop the count, pure and simple. They wanted to stop people from being able to vote. They want to throw ballots out. All of the things that Trump is claiming to do, they're thrilled. They want to do. Because they realize the more of us that come out to the polls, the worse it is for them. Which is why you're going to see the Republicans work through the next weekend to get Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. They've got to ram her through the whole process, got to get her onto that court, especially before Election Day, because they're going to need her. If this is a close election, as some are saying, there are some who are saying it's going to be a blowout. I'm not in the blowout category yet. I think some states like Pennsylvania is going to be close. You get Barrett on the court. I do believe she sides with Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito and the other the other pair, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. I see that happening. And then the balloting, just like in Florida, we stop counting the votes. So they got to get Barrett onto the court if they're going to be able to pull off a successful heist. Now, like I said, they're working through the weekend. They're going to rush this through. What's amazing to me is I haven't heard much coming out of the Senate about helping people who are struggling. I haven't seen a stimulus bill. I haven't seen any real talk from the Senate, even though their candidates really need it. And interestingly enough, I think they're going to wait till the last minute to try and go, see, look what we got, and steal it from the Democrats, even though the Democrats have been going since May. Here, take as much as you need to keep the economy from blowing up. Help people. And it's not about helping people. Not even a little bit. And that's a serious problem. Now understand, the Republicans have a 53-47 majority in the U.S. House, or in the U.S. Senate. 2 of those votes have already said they're not confirming her. So you got a 51-49, which I got to tell you, I don't know that we should be putting someone on the court with that. A lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court with that kind of a vote. But here we are. We're in this moment. So going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out and what kind of games come of it. It's just going to be. Now, personally, I came in today with this mind that was just about to explode. Because I spent the day, making phone calls, talking to union voters, about what their thoughts are, which way they're planning on possibly voting, what issues are important to them, and amazingly, I got to tell you, the right wing does a masterful job of brainwashing people, because I got the lesson today in, if you vote for Joe Biden, this is bad stuff is going to happen, and there was a long laundry list of stuff. Joe Biden gets elected, cities are going to burn. You do realize cities are burning now. There are a couple, and it's not all of them, because I've been to a couple of them. They're not burning. If you vote for Joe Biden, Antifa is going to run the world. If you vote for Joe Biden, MS-13 going to be around every corner, and those other people, they're going to move in right next to you in your suburbs. They're coming for you. Joe Biden's going to defund the police because he hates the police. He's going to destroy the police. So you got a bunch of these. If you vote for Joe Biden, he'll give the illegals health care that you can't get. Huh? If you vote for Joe Biden, he's going to let those people rewrite history and make it all black. If you vote for Joe Biden, he's going to bankrupt the nation, which I got to tell you is one of my favorites. Going to bankrupt the nation. And if you vote for Joe Biden, you're voting for socialism, which I find the most ironic of all of them, coming from people who are card-carrying union members, which, in its in its basic premise, the idea of collective bargaining, collective action is kind of a socialist tenet, but that they're devoid of any of that kind of self-realization. But, it got me thinking, and, it's just this kind of scary world that we live in where, the bankruptcy part, again, it's another one of these moments where Joe Biden's going to bankrupt us because he wants to make sure that the environment's okay, that we have infrastructure, that kids don't go hungry. You mean he's going to bankrupt us because of that? Now, understand, we've got Donald Trump in the White House, who's filed bankruptcy legitimately 3 times. And if he gets reelected, we'll owe $900 million to somebody. We don't know who, but $900 million he's going to owe over the next 4 years. But it's going to be Joe Biden who's going to bankrupt us. Never mind each of the last 3 years, we've had $1 trillion plus budget deficits. Never mind that. Don't look behind the curtain. We're just focusing on Joe Biden here. The radical. He's a radical. I had one guy tell me he's a communist. And I was like, wow. I said, so he's not a socialist. Well, yeah, he's that too. And the thing that gets me is, and it's scary on so many levels, that these folks have truly internalized this, and they absolutely, unequivocally believe it. The part about defunding the police. which is just quite amusing to me on a certain level, because out of one hand, they point to, well, Joe Biden, he wrote that crime bill that was so bad, which you have the African American community going, that locked a lot of people up. It was draconian. That had, 3 strikes and you're out. It had, minimum mandatory sentencing. It had all this stuff that was really, really harsh. Yet on the other side, out of the other side of their mouth is, well, he's going to destroy the police. Now, look, I support the police when they're right. The middle ground for me is I don't think we should defund them. I think we should use them differently. I think there's some restructuring we can do, but most certainly not destroy and abolish. When they're wrong, like any of us. And this is one of these weird moments where you can't find, I used to say, and I used to believe this wholeheartedly, that I could sit down and I could talk to anyone and we could agree on stuff. We could find common ground. And interestingly enough, I'm not anymore, because the right wing has done such a masterful job, such an incredible job of hammering home only their message, which is Joe Biden is horrible, he's bad, or any Democrat. They're all pedophiles, they're all horrible, they're all socialists, they're all communists, they're all horrible human beings who want to bite the heads off of children the second they're born. And you go, where do you get this stuff? And the reality is it's right-wing talk radio, and it's all of the websites and all of the fake news and the fake kind of media that they consume, because this is what they put forth. And it got me thinking about how we got here. And, if you saw the mini series on Showtime, the Comey Rule Showtime series, there was a moment where Donald Trump said he likes TV people because TV people have to get ratings. And it got me thinking about that.